Welcome everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Sarah Joy Kurth. I'm an analyst with the AMA's Accelerating Change Transformation Team, or ACTT, and wanted to welcome you today. And we also have Barb McCaffrey here with us. She is the project team lead for the CII-CPAR project for ACTT, and she'll be helping us field questions. So today is a 30-minute session about learning the mapping for primary care providers using the TELUS PS Suite EMR for CII-CPAR. Note that the session is being recorded, and please feel free to put any questions that you have in the chat throughout the presentation. We will have a Q&A period following the presentation, so we can go to questions in the chat then. You will also have the opportunity to come off of mute and ask any questions at that point. So with that, thank you for joining us, and we'll get started with the presentation. So first, some pre-go live tips, tools, and supports. So I will show you where on our website there are some good tools and resources that you can use. So this is our main website. You can type in act.albertadoctors.org and it will take you to this main page here. And the quickest way of getting to the CII-CPAR page is to go through this menu here. There's other ways of getting to it throughout the website, but that's the quickest way from the home page. So here you'll see the main page. This is an overview of what CII-CPAR is. And then on the side here, you'll see 3 different tools and resources pages. So the first is for primary care physicians. This one is organized by the type of the tool. So if you scroll down, we have some readiness tools, and in here we have all of the orientation presentations for CII-CPAR. So all of the slides in today's presentation will have been taken from here, from this orientation PS Suite presentation. Now, a note that the slides I present today are updated, and we will eventually update this orientation presentation on the website as well, so you will get all of these slides. Now, we also have a tools and resources page for practice facilitators. So this one is organized according to the clinic journey checklist, which you can go to here. And if you scroll down to the engagement and interest area, you will see that we have all of the orientation presentations here under engagement tools as well. And we have here some EMR mapping guides. So these will be some great tools for you to use along with the presentation that I will give you today. And you can use this with your clinic teams and physicians. So I'll show you an example of one. And these are new as of this month, actually, so you may not have had a chance to look at them yet, but there is this one-page poster here that shows all of the data mapping elements that flow up to NetCare, the Community Encounter Digest, as well as the Healthcare Data Repository. So this is a one-page version. You can print it out on ledger paper or legal size paper, whichever you prefer. There's also a 2-page version. This one, the images are larger if you would like to use that instead. And there's also a CED poster. So we'll go through this in more detail in the presentation, but this is a good one-page overview, an example of what a community encounter digest will look like in NetCare in a patient's chart. So those are some supporting tools. If you scroll down further into the go live stage, you'll again see all of the tools here, as well as the CII-CPAR user guides. So here you'll see the PS Suite CII-CPAR user guide. This is a very good tool. It has very detailed instructions on everything that we will go over today. So hopefully that gives you an idea of where to find things on the website. And now I will go back to our presentation. Okay. So now let's look at how CII-CPAR works for PS Suite clinics that are participating. So there are 3 types of information that upload from a community physician's EMR. First, we'll look at the first type of information, and this is encounter data. So designated mapped fields in the EMR will upload every single night from the EMR through the CII Data Hub up into NetCare, and all of these data elements will form the Community Encounter Digest report, which I showed you earlier. As well, the data will get copied to the healthcare data repository, and the data there is used for quality improvement as well as system planning. And just a note that the repository is governed by the Health Information Data Governance Committee. So where can people or providers find the Community Encounter Digest in NetCare? As you can see up here, there's this tree, and about 2 years ago when CII first started, this new section was created called Community Reports. So physicians can go in here and see the Community Encounter Digest for a patient. And just a note that the CED is just a 12-month snapshot of the information from community physician EMRs. Okay, so what does the Community Encounter Digest look like and what does it contain? So first of all, from the day of go live moving forward, the designated data elements move to NetCare to form this document. So any data entered before go live date will not upload into NetCare. And from go live date moving forward, every Albertan who has visited a clinic in Alberta will have that information go up to NetCare as long as the clinics or the provider that they visit is signed up for CII. So the first section of the CED is the Community Encounter section. This provides the encounter date, the location of the encounter, the name of the provider who saw the patient, and importantly, the reason for the encounter, as well as the assessment that was given by the provider during that encounter. The second section is the Health Concern History section. So this pulls from the problem list section of PS Suite. It includes the name of the problem, the provider who entered the problem, and the source or the clinic where the problem was entered. The third section is called Possible Allergy, and this is because it contains allergies whether or not they have been confirmed. And this pulls from the allergies section of PS Suite. The next section is measured observations. These pull from the SOAP notes, and they must be entered using the appropriate syntax. And we'll talk a little bit about what that means later. The next section is immunizations. So these our sample doesn't actually show any, but if the clinic is collecting immunizations, then these will show up in this section of the CED. The final section is referrals. So this shows if a referral has been initiated by a provider. So the example here shows a urology referral and a cardiology referral that were initiated for the patient. And finally, at the bottom here, there's a disclosure statement that reflects the as-is status of the information collected in NetCare. So here's another quick look at all of the data fields that are mapped to NetCare. So green data elements will flow to NetCare, and these will form the Community Encounter Digest, or CED, and they will also be copied to the Healthcare Data Repository. White elements will only go to the Healthcare Data Repository. And finally, the blue elements on the side here, these are elements that will go up to the Central Patient Attachment Registry. And we'll talk about those elements after we've talked about the CED elements. And it should be noted that the elements here were recommended by CII. Now, CII stands for the Canadian Institute of Health Information, and they recommended these as the standard data that should be a part of any patient's shared health record. So now let's look at the individual data fields that map to the Community Encounter Digest and to the Healthcare Data Repository. So just something to note, before going live on CII-CPAR, there is a one-time setup step. So this slide outlines what is required during this step, and you can find more detailed instructions in the PS Suite CII-CPAR EMR guide that I showed you on our website earlier. It should also be noted that most providers find that this signing up for CII-CPAR doesn't really interrupt their workflow unless they are using the EMR in a non-conventional way. So now let's look at the individual data fields that map to the CED and the Healthcare Data Repository. So this is the demographic data that will flow to, it actually flows to NetCare to form the CED, flows to the Healthcare Data Repository, and also flows to the Central Patient Attachment Registry, which we will talk about later. So what is shown here is the data elements that are highlighted in red will flow to all three of those databases. And the ones highlighted in blue will only go to the Healthcare Data Repository. So we see here that the patient's last name, first name, their date of birth, their sex, their PHN, as well as the date that they were last verified will flow to the NetCare, the Healthcare Data Repository, and CPAR. The elements in blue here, middle name, postal code, patient status, and whether or not to exclude the patient from CII-CPAR panel, those will only flow to the Healthcare Data Repository. The appointment information is where the reason for the visit pulls from. So more specifically, it comes from this details field shown right here. And the second image shows where the measured observations pull from. So you can see here, so blood pressure, height, weight, and waist circumference will all pull into the Community Encounter Digest. And it is important to note that these data elements must be entered using the syntax shown here. So to make it easier for providers and clinic team members, they can choose to create a stamp in the EMR that they can easily insert into a SOAP note. The second image also shows that how investigations entered in a SOAP note will pull into the ordered investigations area of the Healthcare Data Repository. Now, it is also important to note that what does not go to NetCare. So notes entered in SOAP, not using the syntax shown here, none of that will flow to NetCare. And the health concern history information. So this will pull from the problem list area of PS Suite, and more specifically, the description field here. So it's important to note that any notes entered in this long detailed section will not pull to NetCare and will not pull to the Healthcare Data Repository. So if you would like to make any additional notes just for your clinic, feel free to put them in there. And then the start date of the problem will only pull to the Healthcare Data Repository. Surgical procedures, so these come from the past health history problems area of PS Suite. Both the procedure date and name of the procedure will only pull to the Healthcare Data Repository. Possible allergies, so these pull into the Community Encounter Digest and the Healthcare Data Repository. They come from the allergy section of the EMR. Immunizations come from the new treatment section of the EMR, and the date of the vaccine, the name of the vaccine itself, as well as the lot number, these will all pull into the Encounter or Community Encounter Digest. Lastly, if a referral is initiated during a visit, At the time of the visit, it will record the type of provider to which the referral is being sent. So in this case, the referral is being sent to a specialist in the dermatology specialty. So this is really useful on the Community Encounter Digest, because if this patient were to visit another provider in Alberta for the same concern, that provider would be able to see that a referral for that concern has already been initiated. So this is a really good way of avoiding duplication of referrals. And the same would apply if the patient went to the emergency department. The provider there would also be able to see that the referral had been initiated. So this is where the provider and clinic information that flow into NetCare come from. Note that the provider specialty that's recorded in the Community Encounter Digest comes from the clinician type drop-down field here. Also, the site name is how the clinic name will appear in the Community Encounter Digest. And finally, this screen shows a summary of all of the different fields and how they map to the CED, so how they all come together into that CED report. Now, as mentioned before, information only pulls from go live date moving forward, and anything entered in the notes will not pull to the CED. So this is a good summary that you can pull this slide out and show it to providers and clinic teams to show them exactly how all of the fields flow. And this slide shows the conditions required in the EMR for encounter information in the EMR to flow to NetCare. So all of these conditions must be met before information can flow. So first of all, anytime a new visit note or an old visit note is modified or updated, that new information will flow up to NetCare. You also need to make sure that the patient's current encounter and as well as their entire chart are not marked as private. And finally, we need to make sure that the visit notes are marked finish, and that means that they have a yellow bar above them. Now let's talk a little bit about confidentiality. So you can check off the exclude from CII-CPAR panel field here, and this will prevent data from, or the patient from flowing into the central patient attachment registry. So we'll talk a little bit about that later, but note that checking this field off will not prevent information from flowing to NetCare or the healthcare data repository. There are other ways that we can do that. So there are a number of options for this, and you can do this in the same way as if you were masking data from other users in the clinic. Note that doing this may prevent other users from seeing the data as well. So again, you can go to the PS Suite EMR guide as well as the PS Suite help files for details on how to do this. They are also outlined here on this slide. And you can apply confidentiality to an entire patient's chart, a single encounter, or a section of the patient chart. And again, more information can be found on our website. So now let's talk about the second kind of information that pulls from the EMR up into NetCare. And these are consult reports. So any provider that receives a referral and writes a consult letter can choose to sign up to CII and have those consult reports flow through the CII Data Hub and up into NetCare, where they can show as a PDF copy of this consult report. And note that this will be the same kind of idea as when the clinic is faxing the referral back to the primary provider. It will just be a PDF of that. Also note that specialists, when they sign up for CII, they can choose which consult reports will actually flow up to NetCare. So not all consult reports will suddenly be uploaded. So there is some configuration required to be able to upload consult reports to NetCare. And these steps will allow the provider to choose which consult reports to share. So the steps required are as follows. And again, these are all outlined in the CII-CPAR user guide, so I strongly encourage you to go look at that. So the provider will start the letter as normal. They open the patient's record, and then they can go to data and choose new letter, or they can quickly hit Control or Command plus the L key on the keyboard. Now, if you do not have a doctor role and you are not logged in with a supervising doctor, you will be prompted to choose whether the letterhead should be in your name or someone else's. So in that case, you will want to click Choose a Letterhead Person and type the initials of the supervising doctor. So that's the doctor who's signed up for CII. You will also want to ensure you check off letters will be eligible for encounter data extract in your user settings. So you can refer to the CII-CPAR guide, the section called Enabling EMR Integration CII, and that's on page 9. So if you create the letter in your name, or the preference is not selected, the letter will not be sent to NetCare. So it's important to follow those steps. Once you've completed step 1, the addressees window will then open. In this new window, in the To field, you will want to choose the letter addressee. So to add a recipient that is stored in the address book, click on the icon and type the first few letters of the provider that you would like to add, or the specialty of the provider, and press Tab to filter the list. To add a recipient that is not stored in the address book, click One-Time Address. Now, a quick tip, if the patient has a referring MD or nurse practitioner entered in their demographics, this person will appear by default as the letter addressee. The problem with this is that the eligible for encounter data extract checkbox will not appear. So you must choose the addressee using one of the 2 methods I just spoke about so that you can check off that checkbox and the data will flow to NetCare. Step 3, you will select the eligible for encounter data extract checkbox. Step 4, finish the letter as you normally would. Select any attachments that you would like to send with the letter. And then finally, mark the letter as finished if you have not yet done so. Close the patient's record, and the letter will be sent to NetCare. So where do the consult letters sit in NetCare? So there is here, this slide shows the tree that you'll see in NetCare. There's a folder called Consultations, and you will see all of the uploaded consult letters for a patient here. Note that physicians and teams should be fairly familiar with this folder already, as it is not a new field in NetCare. So finally, the third type of information that can leave the EMR is confirmed panel lists. So this information is uploaded both to the Central Patient Attachment Registry and to the Healthcare Data Repository. Again, the Healthcare Data Repository data is used for quality improvement and system planning. So on a monthly basis, confirmed panel lists will leave the EMR through the CII Data Hub and then go up to the Central Patient Attachment Registry, as well as be copied to the HDR. Then from CII-CPAR, the clinic will receive 2 types of reports. So the first is called a demographic mismatch report. Page 1 of the report will display any patients who have become deceased within the last month since the last upload. So this is a real value add for clinics. It helps avoid that awkward conversation that clinics might have with patients without knowing that they were deceased. So this is an easy way for them to find out about those patients. The second part of the demographic mismatch report is shows any demographic mismatches between the demographic information entered in the physician's EMR and the information in the provincial client registry. Now, the second report that comes from CII-CPAR is called the Panel Conflict Report. So this report displays paneled patients on the CII-CPAR participating providers paneled patients that are also on other providers participating or on the panels of other providers participating in CII-CPAR. It will also display the date of the last visit, as well as the date of the last date of confirmation with any conflicting providers. So this enables providers to see patients who have said yes to the panel question to more than one provider in Alberta. And identifying these conflicts will give providers a better picture of their panels and where care might be duplicated. This also enables conversations with patients about the benefits of continuity and the risks of seeing multiple providers. So now let's talk about panel submission rules in PS Suite. First, you can find a CII-CPAR registered provider's panel number under Settings, then go to Preferences, then CII-CPAR Preferences, and then Preferences for specific providers. And as shown here, this is the panel number. Also note that the following criteria must be met for a physician's panel to be uploaded to CII-CPAR. So this is these checkboxes here. So the patient must not be excluded from CII-CPAR panel. So that's this checkbox here. Leave this unchecked if you would like the patient to go to CII-CPAR. The patient's MD/NP field must be a provider registered for CII-CPAR. The patient's PHN and gender must both be recorded. In this case, this is the sex field here. The patient's status must be active. And finally, this is very important, the patient must have a last visit date as well as a last verified date. So all of these conditions must be met for a patient to flow up to the Central Patient Attachment Registry. So as previously mentioned, you can check off the exclude from CII-CPAR panel field to prevent a patient from flowing to CII-CPAR. Just a reminder though, this will not keep patient information from flowing to NetCare or the healthcare data repository. Okay, so how do panels upload? So TELUS uploads panels automatically on the 10th of the month from the EMR. And if there are any uploading error, the person who can log into the CII-CPAR application, also called the panel administrator, can log into CII-CPAR and see any error reports. And a demographic mismatch report will be available for download 2 days after that. Now on the 22nd of the month, this is when CII-CPAR starts to mismatch and match all data available. And then panel conflict reports are available on the 2nd day of the month. So an important thing we want to emphasize as well is e-notifications. Note that these are not yet live in PS Suite, but we expect them to be live in August of this year, so August 2020. So what are e-notifications? E-notifications are automated messages delivered directly into the physician's EMR with information about key healthcare events for paneled patients. So that is any patient that goes up to CII-CPAR. So what are these key events? So physicians will be notified when a patient is either admitted or discharged from hospital, visits an emergency department, or has a day surgery. So these notices are sent and pushed out daily at 6 a.m. and 2 p.m. and they display very similarly to how a lab report would display in the EMR. Now note that any team member in the clinic who has access to the lab reports can see these notifications. So responding to these notifications can be a team effort. Also note that all physicians who have a patient or who have this patient paneled to them and are sending that information up to CII-CPAR will also get these notifications. And you will see, as shown down here, which additional providers were notified about this patient's discharge, admission, emergency department visit, or day surgery. So right now we are hearing that e-notifications are the highest value proposition for CII-CPAR. And providers are very excited about getting these timely, valuable information. So these are important to communicate when you're engaging clinics in CII-CPAR. Now, again, these come 7 days a week from any AHS facility in Alberta back to the primary provider. There is one exception. So most day surgery sites are signed up, but not 100%. And this is more to do with data issues than willingness issues. So we're hoping to get 100% soon. So that is where we are at for the mapping information and functionality for CII-CPAR and e-notifications for the PS Suite EMR. So please remember to visit our website for more detailed guides and instructions, as well as those CED mapping 1-pager, 2-pagers, as well as the CED sample itself. You may also want to visit the top website here. It's called the Alberta NetCare /Learning Center /CII. There's some great learning materials on there about how CII works. And with that, I will conclude the presentation part of the session. So please feel free to ask any questions in the chat or come off mute to ask any questions you might have. So I see we have some chats here. Yeah, so go ahead if you have anything you would like to ask.
Hi, Sarah. This is Rosie Grainer.
Hi.
I just have a question about, and thank you so much for the presentation. It's very helpful to see you presenting it. Thank you.
No problem. Thanks, Rosa.
I had a question about the e-notification. I'm not sure how will they be receiving this in PS Suite? Does it come in as a message, or do they need to download them, like they download labs, or?
So yeah, so they actually, I believe they come in automatically into the the lab as like a lab report. I'll let Barbara maybe expand more on that though.
Yeah, Rosa, I'll just add that it is very much the same workflow as a lab report. And we will have screenshots ready when we're getting closer to go live in August.
Perfect, thank you.
Hey guys, sorry, I just have a super weird question. Is there anywhere on the CED that specifies the patient's primary physician?
Yes, let me go back to that. Oh, actually, Barb, I'm not sure.
Yeah, it doesn't on the CED.
Okay.
But actually, nobody's asked us that yet.
Yeah.
That's a really great question, Sam.
It will show in NetCare though.
Right.
Is that correct, Barb, or that's a coming functionality?
That is under development. They're right now building the requirements, and it will display in NetCare and very likely Person Directory. But the requirements haven't been completed. But you know what, Sam, I'm gonna bring this back and ask about the CED and the potential to display there as well.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so hearing no more questions, we'll stay online a little bit longer if anyone else wants to stay on and ask any questions. But with that, I'd like to thank you for taking your lunch hour to be with us, and have a great afternoon.